Vagabhat was the uncle of Veer Narayan who was ruling over Ranthambore in 1226. At the same time, Iltutmish, who was the slave of Qutbuddin Aibak, he had taken over the rule in New Delhi or the Delhi Sultanate. Now, Iltutmish wanted Ranthambore in any circumstances and he attacked Veer Narayan multiple times. But the fact remains that he could not defeat Veer Narayan in open battle even once. And the main reason for that was that Veer Narayan was under the guidance of Vagabhat, who was his uncle, that is his father's younger brother. Vagabhat was a very, very shrewd strategist, extremely brave warrior, and one of the strongest Rajput noblemen of his time in Rajputana. Iltutmish realized that there is no way he can defeat Veer Narayan in open battle, so he invited him to Delhi under the pretext of having a feast to figure out how they can work together and rule over it. Now, Vagabhat suspected that there was something nefarious at hand over here and he advised Veer Narayan to refuse this invitation. He specifically told Veer Narayan, do not trust Iltutmish, do not trust any of these sultans because they have a habit of saying one thing and doing another thing. But Veer Narayan was flying high because of his victories over Iltutmish, and in his arrogance, he not only decided to accept the invitation from Iltutmish, but he also insulted his uncle, that is Vagabhat, and told him that you've now become old and senile, you don't understand politics, you don't understand how kings are supposed to behave, so my suggestion is you go on a pilgrimage. So sending him on a Tirth Yatra or a pilgrimage, against Vagabhat's advice, Veer Narayan went to Delhi. What about Vagabhat? Vagabhat felt so insulted and heartbroken that he left the Ranthambore kingdom and took refuge in the kingdom of Malwa. Meanwhile, when Veer Narayan got to Delhi, Iltutmish greeted him with a lot of humility and love, held a massive feast, a dinner to host Veer Narayan, and in that duration, he poisoned Veer Narayan and had him killed. Vagabhat was out of the way because he was in Malwa under self-banishment. Veer Narayan was dead and there was no one to stop Iltutmish from taking over Ranthambore Fort, which is what he did. In the year 1226 is when he captured Ranthambore Fort. But he knew that as long as Vagabhat was alive, his hold over the fort would always be very tenuous. If he had to consolidate his hold, he had to get Vagabhat out of the way permanently. The king of Malwa was a vassal of the Sultanate of Delhi. By vassal, it means somebody who was ruling under the patronage of the Sultan. So, Iltutmish had a message sent to the king of Malwa saying that you must arrest and kill Vagabhat immediately. But Vagabhat was no spring chicken. He had his own informers in the Malwa court who gave him information about this message coming down from Iltutmish. And before the king of Malwa could act on it, with the help of his supporters, Vagabhat killed the king of Malwa and appointed himself as the Rana or the king of Malwa. So here's where we are. Veer Narayan is dead. The Delhi Sultanate is in a very strong position. They've captured Ranthambore Fort, but Vagabhat is still around and he is now the king of Mewar. Vagabhat did sit quiet after doing this. He immediately started consolidating his position. Now, what we need to understand is at this point in time, while there were a lot of Rajput princes and a lot of Rajput kings who had pledged their support to the Delhi Sultanate out of fear, there were several of them who were either fighting or who were waiting for a chance to rebel against the Delhi Sultanate. Vagabhat took advantage of this very situation. Very soon, in about 5 or 6 years, all the princely states that were against the Delhi Sultanate came under Vagabhat's flag. They did not merge their kingdoms with him, but they joined hands with him to form a common front to take on the Delhi Sultanate. 1232, Iltutmish died and his daughter Razia Sultan was appointed to the throne. Now Razia Sultan was facing a lot of objection from within the Delhi court. So we need to understand that this was a pretty conservative era. The sultans, being hardcore Islamists, were also very conservative in their outlook, and it was not acceptable to them that a woman can rule over them. So Razia Sultan was fighting multiple battles within the court and outside. Using this as an opportune moment, Vagabhat attacked the Ranthambore Fort. And his attack was so devastating that in a few short days, he completely annihilated the Sultanate's forces from there, drove out the nobles and captured Ranthambore once again. What needs to be noted here is that Bhagavat did not put all the nobles who were occupying the fort to death. He allowed them to go back to the Delhi court. He didn't just stop there. He immediately set about setting garrisons approaching the fort from all four directions, so that the Ranthambore dynasty or the Rajputs, the Chamana dynasty, is not taken by surprise for a second time. The other thing which he did was he strengthened the fortifications within the fort itself. Even if the armies that are attacking them get through the garrisons, they should not be able to take over the fort, and the fort should be strong enough to withstand any force attacking it. Bhagavat was one of the most successful, valiant and strategic rulers of the Chamana dynasty. So much so that in Iltutmish's memoirs, in his biography, his own biographers have stated that Bhagavat was one of the most valorous and noble of Rais. They called the Rajputs the Rais. So even they accepted that if it was not for Bhagavat, then the Delhi Sultanate would have captured entire Rajputana. He was probably the sole Rajput ruler who stood between complete annihilation of the Rajput kingdoms and taking over by the Delhi Sultanate. One of the greatest heroes of Indian history, who most certainly deserves to be remembered and revered for his service to our nation.